If you're a VC and you're trying to make your portfolio companies successful and your companies are making a software product for developers, you better believe that developer education is going to be a really key part of your strategy. Because without it, you're going to have a very hard time getting developers to recommend that product or adopt it.
Welcome to Under the Hood of Developer Marketing, the podcast devoted to developer marketing, relations, evangelism, and advocacy. I'm Stathis Georgakopoulos, and I'm your host. In each episode, I welcome a guest from the developer marketing world. We talk about best practices, challenges, lessons learned, and share insights, data, and experiences to help you boost your DevRel game, talk to, and engage with developers. This podcast is brought to you by SlashData, the leading analyst of the developer economy, and DevRelX.com, a hub devoted to providing resources for developer marketing professionals, including developer ecosystem trends, news and job openings, webinars, a book, and a bi-weekly digest you can subscribe to. Access them all at DevRelX.com. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Under the Hood of Developer Marketing. I'm very excited for today as I'll be welcoming two guests to talk about developer education and enablement. They are Nate Aune, founder and CEO of Appsembler, and Shannon Bradshaw, education partner at Unusual Ventures. Nate and Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Let's get to know you first. What did you want to be as a child when you grew up? Nate, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I wanted to be a lot of things, but I think if I had to pick one, I was an inventor. I was always taking things apart when I was a kid, trying to figure out how they worked. Sometimes I could even put them back together again. So yeah, I've always been interested in technology and solving problems.
Okay, that's great. I'm sure your parents weren't super excited that you took apart the toys. But yeah, I'm sure there's bonus points for creativity and, inventing stuff. Shannon, what about you?
Yeah, so I focused early on wanting to be a scientist and did, to some degree, end up achieving that as a computer scientist. Like Nate, I like to tinker. I like to take things apart. And what I learned about myself over time was that I really enjoyed blending technology and science with, humanities-related topics, writing, art, that sort of thing.
Okay, that definitely sounds awesome. Sounds like a Star Trek career you were looking at, to be honest. Combining science and culture and everything.
I never thought about it that way. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. So let's, tell us a bit more about yourself and how, for example, Nate, you went from an inventor or toy breaker, to creating Appsembler.
Yeah, like I said, I've always been interested in technology and being able to use technology to solve problems. And, so in high school, I had a number of internships at various software companies. That's when I first learned about Unix. And then in college, I studied computer science. Like Shannon, I got my first exposure to Linux at the university AI lab. And then I got my first job out of college as a webmaster back when that was the title that they called people who built websites at an international school. So I was building the school's first website. And then later I got a job at Learning Lab Denmark, it's kind of like the MIT Media Lab, but in Denmark. And the organization was looking for a CMS, content management system, to manage the school's website. And I came across this open source Python-based CMS called Plone. And Plone was just getting started back then. So it was a pretty small community, but that was my first experience being involved with an open source community. And it really shaped my whole look on the software industry and, a long career being involved in various open source communities. So when I came back to the US after being overseas for a while, I started a web consultancy, building websites and web applications using Plone. And then I started, branching out outside of the Plone community, got involved with the Django community, Python, Docker, and OpenEdX. And really the common thread throughout my whole career is education. My mom was an educator. I grew up in a household where we were always learning new things, going to the library and reading and studying. And so I've always been very interested in learning new things and teaching other people. And as a developer, I've taken an interest in developer education. So fast forwarding to the present, my current company, Appsembler, offers a platform for developer-centric companies like Redis, Chef, Cockroach Lab to help them create hands-on learning experiences. So this is primarily for a technical audience. And the focus is really on learning by doing, right? Getting developers into the product as quickly as possible, getting them excited about what they can do with the software, and then nurturing them throughout their learning journey.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm really glad that the inventor part of your childhood, you held the create part and not the destroy one. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you mentioned there. And I just want to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Appsembler for being our partners in 2021 with a Future Developer Summit. Great to have you on our side. And Shannon, how about you? How was your journey like?
Yeah, so I went to university to study computer science, and my original intention was to go be a software engineer after I got my undergraduate. But I just really enjoy the process of learning. I have a lot of energy around learning about new topics, about taking what I already know and trying to extend that into other areas. And I just found myself pursuing graduate school. College is kind of a big personal learning journey, not just in terms of the curriculum that your instructors are putting in front of you, but learning about yourself. And what I was beginning to realize is that I kind of wanted a path that would allow me to just really keep learning for a living and help others learn as well. So went through graduate school, got a PhD in computer science, and started a career as an academic, as a computer science professor. Absolutely loved the experience of learning what I needed to know in order to teach undergraduates and graduate students, working with other faculty on cross-disciplinary projects, learning about their spaces and working with our, shared students, building software. Had a couple of different projects where I was working closely with English and French literature scholars, and we were working on annotating high-res digitizations of ancient manuscripts. So essentially really thinking about that user experience. And at some point I realized I was more interested in the pedagogy and the instructional aspects of being a professor than I was really in the publish or perish paradigm in academia. And so I left my role in a research institution, and I went and taught at a small college here in New Jersey, and had an opportunity really to build a computer science program at this university. We incorporated externships and internships, and had a nice big lab where students and I and some other faculty were able to work together during the summers on really applied types of projects, essentially software engineering projects for partners. And then I had this really interesting outreach message one day from a recruiter at a company called MongoDB. They had this crazy idea that they wanted to take their developer education effort to a whole different level. This was back when MOOCs were just getting off the ground. So these massive open online courses on platforms like edX and Udacity and Coursera, we're enrolling tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of students, and learners from all over the world were kind of sharing in a learning experience, both in terms of the curriculum as well as community. So MongoDB wanted to do this for their users. So wrestled with this decision because I was very happy in my being a computer science professor, but ultimately decided to join MongoDB. And over the course of 7 years with Mongo, built MongoDB University. We had millions of students around the world taking our online courses about MongoDB. Eventually ended up leading the documentation team at MongoDB, and effectively, together with my team and colleagues, really owning the developer enablement and developer education experience for all MongoDB users. And it was an amazing learning experience, figuring out how to do that in a way that really engaged learners, got people excited, but was very authentic. Like we're concerned about helping them address the problems that they were wrestling with as developers and help them find a good solution using MongoDB. I took that role about as far as I thought I could, and then took a break for about a year, recharged. And about a year ago, I joined Unusual Ventures as a partner for education. And in my role at Unusual, I work very closely with startup companies, and I help them build their developer enablement or developer education function. We take a very serious look at the kinds of tutorials that they need, the documentation that they need, instructional videos, and even self-paced online courses, as well as instructor-led training once they're a little bit later in their company building journey. And so in this role, I have an opportunity to really see what it's like, what patterns work best across a variety of different types of software, user communities, and disciplines in helping build a company through making your users successful, enabling them to solve the problems that they need to be able to solve with your software.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like how you both address the topic of education. And obviously for our listeners, they might have already guessed it, that this is what we will be talking about today, developer education and developer enablement. But first, let's talk data. I'd like you to pick a graph from devrlex.com/trends and tell us why and what in that graph stands out to you. Nate, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, so the one that stands out to me is the very first one on that page. It's the one called documentation, tutorials, tools, and community engagement are the core of developer programs. And what I like about this is the breakdown of core and extended core, because what we often see when we start working with software companies, especially earlier stage, is that they typically will have developer documentation, they'll have some sample code, they might have a few tutorials, but they haven't really matured to the point of having what in this infographic is called the extended core. So these are things like training courses, hands-on labs, more rich technical support. And this is kind of what I see, from more mature software companies, is that they sort of outgrow the developer documentation is sort of par for course, right? If you're a software company, you need to have that, but it's not enough. And that developers today are really looking for ways to use your software that fits their use case. So I like to call this like project-based learning, where you take a use case, like I'm a developer, I need to solve this problem. Show me how your software can help me solve this problem. And that's really where the training courses and the hands-on labs come in, because they give you a very practical example. Like you're trying to build X, here's how you do that. So it's a bit like a tutorial, but it's typically a longer form. There's labs involved, and it's really focused on getting you to understand the value that the software provides and how it's going to help you get your job done more easily.
Yeah, that's I like how you took this graph and applied real life scenarios on what this means. And Shannon, how about you?
Same graph. Absolutely agree with Nate on the importance of the extended core. I will say, however, that I think that there are still a number of organizations that don't put enough effort into documentation and tutorials. And what really drew me to this graph is how essential and fundamental the developer audience believes documentation to be, as is evidenced by their responses here in this survey. I think that it is absolutely, docs are table stakes. They're what you have to bring to the table if you're going to succeed as a software company. But you still see a lot of organizations who are waiting until the last minute to get those docs out, and they're more of a nice to have than part of a release. The most successful companies really treat docs as part of the product. And roll out, if a new feature is going to roll out, that feature's not done until there are really solid feature docs written and published as well. And it's nice to see that overall philosophy is actually reflected in the developer opinion per this survey.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's come up like, I don't even know how many times in this podcast that, documentation is where you start. And I like how you make this connection, with, as you said, the most successful companies with that, it's part of the product. And I do strongly believe that it should be. Now, let's move on to our main theme for the day. And what I want to ask you is, with more and more software driven and developer focused startups and companies popping up, has the VC's appetite for developer education topics changed? And just to everyone is clear for our listeners, when VC we mean venture capitalists. So Nate, would you like to start?
Yeah, and I'll just preface this by saying I'm not a VC, and I can't speak on behalf of VCs, but I do talk with VCs on occasion. And Shannon works for a VC, so he's maybe more qualified to answer this question. But I will say that from my experience, a lot of VCs are seeing the most successful software companies employ a strategy called product-led growth. And the idea is you have more of a bottoms-up approach to selling your software, where people can come in, they can try it out, usually on a freemium or a free trial, and kind of take their, go at their own pace to learn about the software and how it works. This is especially effective for developer-oriented tools, where developers really don't want to talk to a salesperson. They don't typically want to get marketed to. And so how does a software company attract developers to the product in a non-salesy way? And what companies like MongoDB have shown is that developer education can be a really effective strategy to educate developers about what the product does, how it works, how it adds value. And so I think VCs are now realizing that this is a really effective strategy, to employ at the very early stages of a startup to get someone in that education role and help build out a program that can speak to developers in their own language, right? In a way that they understand. And it's becoming a really effective strategy for a lot of high growth software companies that want to reach developers in a way that is more effective than traditional marketing methods.
Yeah. Now, based on what Nate mentioned, now, Shannon, you are in a position to judge this both from the VC perspective and also the MongoDB perspective. Many other companies have benchmarked how they're going to run things on the MongoDB example. So what's your input of that?
So my current role is all about that. I work for a VC who, as an organization, has decided that developer education is so important. We're going to build a team within our VC dedicated to helping our portfolio companies build their own education functions. And that means doing the internal education necessary to help them understand how to build great docs and hands-on experiences to go to market with a PLG strategy, if that's appropriate for their product, and to roll out self-paced courses and other forms of more formal training. This also includes hiring full-time education leaders and their teams into these organizations. So, and unusual is maybe early in building out a practice in this way within the organization. But my sense is that it is, if not already pretty well accepted, certainly becoming increasingly well accepted, that you have to put a lot of energy and investment behind enabling your users to be successful with your product, but also with how you teach people how to use your product.
Yeah, and from your case in Unusual Ventures, for example, it's part of your strategy to focus on this developer education. And this question is obviously for both of you. Do you think that VCs in general care for developer education or developer enablement?
Yes, I do. I think that I've spoken with a number of organizations that we don't have a relationship with as Unusual Ventures, and they're following the same sort of path to building out an education function. Sometimes it lives within a customer success organization. Sometimes it lives within engineering. Sometimes it lives within product. But in all, I see evidence of their investors and their leadership being extremely interested in developer education across the software industry in a variety of different domains and, enterprise software, SaaS products, et cetera.
Yeah, Nate?
Yeah, I think it's interesting distinction too between education and enablement, because there's both the importance of educating people once they've become a customer and they've bought the product. That's what we typically think of as enablement. But then there's just more what I like to call like demand gen, right? Providing educational content that educates people about what you're in, the industry that you're in. And let's say you're making a new kind of technology that is maybe not so pervasive. It's not a well-known mainstream technology. Even before you can get people to try your product, you may just need to educate them on why this technology space is even important. Like, what is it going to do for your business? And so what we see a lot of our customers doing is providing more general training on the space that they're in. So like if you're a chef and you make a cloud automation tool set, you may want to provide a course on what is DevOps for companies that don't even know what that term means. Nowadays, most people know what DevOps is, but back when Chef was first doing this, that was kind of a new thing. And so a lot of the education is priming people to be receptive to your product and understand why they would adopt it in the first place. It's not even product education so much as it is helping people understand the value of the technology space that you're in and that you're creating. And that's something that can help drive growth, right? It's very hard to get someone to buy your product if they don't understand why they would use it. And so a lot of education is just helping people understand the why, not just the what.
Yes, and thank you for taking the time to make this distinction between education and enablement. Makes it a lot clearer. Yet, how can someone really convince VCs that, developer education is valuable? It might seem intuitive, for example, to us who are within this industry, but, for someone who's not.
Yeah. I think VCs are realizing that developers are increasingly becoming very influential within their organizations. And, while software used to be purchased very top down, right? It was usually like a C-suite who would be wined and dined by a vendor, and then they would make a top down decision. Nowadays, software is purchased much more bottoms up. It's developers getting in, trying out the software, and then they make a recommendation to the decision maker and say, hey, we've been running this thing through its paces. We've done a POC. We believe that this is the product that's going to work for us. And so nowadays, I've heard stats up to like 96% of developers have some role in the purchasing process of software that's adopted at their organization. So if you're a VC and you're trying to make your portfolio companies successful, and your companies are making a software product for developers, you better believe that developer education is going to be a really key part of your strategy. Because without it, you're going to have a very hard time getting developers to recommend that product or adopt it.
Yeah. Shannon?
Sure. So it's absolutely the case that developers are really what drives a lot of purchasing decisions. This is the model that we used at MongoDB, focusing on the developer experience, obsessing over it really, because when you win the mind share of develop, they're going to agitate internally for adoption. And so most go-to-market strategies nowadays for organizations are following a bottom-up strategy, as Nate identified. For this reason, you do still need a sales organization. You need to be able to come at it both bottom up and top down. But we find that top down strategy, bringing in sales, really makes a lot more sense and is a lot more effective once you've already got a lot of interest within an organization, because you've already convinced the developers in that org that this is the product that they want to use. And they are advocating with their management, and their management is advocating up the chain to the person who can sign the checks, that this is a product that we need to adopt. And then sales can come in and really figure out what it's going to take for the buyer to get on board and help the organization run any kind of, formalized internal proof of concept testing, a more formal integration testing, that sort of thing, to make it a reality. But it all begins with that first developer who learns about your product through an awareness campaign that you're running, and begins their learning journey with it, first typically with some tutorials, and then into documentation, and then in some sort of hands-on experience, whether it's a formal free trial that you set up in your product, that documentation helps guide them through, or trying it out in some other way. Making that experience as positive and as successful for that developer as possible is really what developer education is all about. And getting that initial user convinced to the point where they're willing to go evangelize within their organization, begin to show what it is they're able to do with your product to their colleagues, and then get their colleagues excited about it. And eventually they take it to their manager. That is how software products are being sold today. So having an expert developer education game is really fundamental to the success of your organization, of your company.
Yeah, that's great. And I also want to add, because you did both mention it, about how buying decisions are no longer, at least in their majority, top down, but developers have an active role in the tools that they'll be using, the purchase decisions. And actually in Future Developer Summit, the episode 2, we did our presentation from our analysts was based exactly on that, showing how developers are involved in the purchasing decisions within a company. So if anyone wants to know more about it, you can go to the DevRelX blog or the futuredeveloper.io website and access the presentation there. Now, I think we've both been very clear about, the actual value of developer education, right? But how can you prove it? Like, what kind of metrics can you use to prove this value? Nate?
Yeah, so metrics and analytics are hugely important for our customers. Really what they're trying to do is measure the effectiveness of the education towards product adoption is usually what they're aiming for. If you take it even further, it's not just adoption, but it's also revenue and retention, right? It's financial metrics. But what our customers are typically measuring is, how many people are enrolling in a course, how many people are completing those courses, and how is that educational journey affecting the product adoption. So this is both pre-sales, like before they become a customer, as well as after they become a customer. Are they continuing to learn about the product, and how is that product adoption proliferating throughout the organization, right? Is it just a small group of people, or is it spreading? Are there more people at the organization that are adopting it? So those are the kinds of things that our customers are really keen on measuring. And, they want to have nurturing campaigns. Shannon mentioned this earlier, how important it is to, once you get a developer in learning about the product and you get them hooked, you want to keep them coming back. You want to keep them engaged and excited, and also telling their colleagues about it. And the way that most of our customers do that is using, marketing automation software like Marketo or Eloqua or HubSpot, basically sending out emails that are not your sort of traditional marketing emails, but they're more emails reminding them of the learning experience and what they signed up to learn about, and saying, hey, we noticed that you signed up for this course. Your homework is due on Tuesday, and you might be interested in coming back and checking that out. And those emails get very high open rates compared to like a traditional marketing email, because it's all about learning, it's all about education, it's all about helping you to grow in your career and become a better developer. So that's one of the things that I think is so important to measure, is the engagement of those developers. After that initial spark, when they come in, they try it out. Do they keep coming back? And are they enrolling in more intermediate or more advanced courses after they take kind of those initial quick start type experiences, like the hands-on labs that Shannon was mentioning?
So I love that you brought up the nurture campaign emails. So as Nate mentioned early on, it is developers really hate to be marketed to. They hate to be sold to. But I think I'm not unusual, or Nate spoke to a love of learning as well. I think in general, a lot of developers or software engineers are lifelong learners. They love to learn about new technologies, and so sending them an email to remind them of a learning journey that they started that they might want to pick back up again is such a great way to bring them back in and to kind of keep them moving in engaging with your product. And at MongoDB, we had really big success with these nurture campaign emails. I had somebody on my team at the time. Her name's Nate Aune. She now leads the education function at Lacework. She was a master of writing these nurture campaigns, of developing these nurture campaigns, and we would have 60% click-through rates for some of these campaigns. Getting people to come back in to the learning experiences that we were providing through MongoDB University. Nate also spoke to trying to get a sense from what you're seeing in the data, the degree of interest within an organization. At MongoDB, we had a report that we would produce weekly called the smoke report, coming from the idea of where there's smoke, there's fire. And a major component of that was looking at the registration or other forms of engagement data that we were tracking for MongoDB University, and looking for clusters of individuals who all had the same email address domain. Essentially looking for clusters of activity or interest within organizations. And that was an important part of the prospecting that the sales organization then would use in terms of prioritizing their pipeline, their outreach. So if there was an indication that there was a large, it could be anything, anywhere from, 2, 3, 5 individuals in an org up to 20, say, who might be all of a sudden jumping in and learning about MongoDB. That was a red hot signal that we needed to reach out there and see if we could begin to talk to that organization about either offering some services or maybe about an initial subscription for Mongo. Once we had rolled out the SaaS product, were they aware of the SaaS product? Was that something that would meet their needs? So paying attention to what that data is telling you is one of the strongest ways to get a sense for the degree of interest within a prospective organization. Nate also mentioned, have they moved from introductory courses to advanced courses? That was a whole new level of interest for us, a much stronger signal of interest if we had people taking advanced courses than intro courses, because those were typically people who had moved from kicking the tires to really beginning to use MongoDB in a real way in production, or certainly in their dev environment, really beginning to think about putting it into. So especially for open source companies, this can be a really powerful tool for figuring out where the commercial possibilities are among your user base.
Yes,
yeah,
please,
if I can just riff on what Shannon just said. Open source software companies optimize for ubiquity, right? They want to get their software out to as many people as possible with the expectation that some percentage of the people using the open source version will want commercial support, hosting, advanced features, whatnot. And so one example from a company that we worked, Redis Labs, they're now called Redis, they had 1 billion downloads of the Redis Docker image off of Docker Hub. And if you're a CMO at Redis and you have 1 billion people downloading your software, the first question you're going to ask is, who the heck are these people? Like, who are all these people who are downloading our software? And, in the interest of ubiquity, they didn't ask people to provide an email address prior to downloading it. They just want to just remove all the friction, make it really easy for people to get access to Redis. And this is very common among open source companies. The problem with that is, how do you then make a connection to that anonymous developer who downloaded your software? And what Redis did, which is a page out of the MongoDB University playbook, is they essentially created the Redis University. And they reached out to Redis developers and said, hey, if you downloaded Redis and you want to learn more about it, we invite you to come and take free courses at the Redis University. And in exchange for getting these free courses, they needed to register and provide an email address. And once they had that email address, then that opened up the possibility, as Shannon said, to look for these clusters of people from the same company that were trying out Redis and using it. So that's another really key thing for open source companies, is this gives you a connection to your audience that you didn't previously have. By giving away free courses, free education, it creates that connection. It gives you a path to learn more about your developer audience.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of how you can go about it, and it's exactly as I mentioned before. How MongoDB at times set the standard of how to do that.
Can I interject just one more thing about
yes,
the open source community here? Is developer education is an amazing opportunity for the community arm of an open source company. So the people within an open source company who are engaged with the community directly, either in building up the community, developing champions within the community, or someone in more of a DevRel capacity who's really focused on user success within that community, with an eye toward community building as well. When people get together around a technology and want to learn it, they like to talk about what they're learning. They like to talk about the problems they're solving, and like to get help from other people in the community. And what I've seen happen time and again with companies that roll out a substantial developer education portal is they have a huge community that develops around that educational opportunity, whether it's Redis University or MongoDB University or some other. And that is a very healthy community, typically, that you can use to find some of those champions that you want to use, who will be evangelists for you within their own networks. So it's a way of magnifying the evangelistic effects of the educational offering that you're providing by having your community team really tap into the community discussion, the community that's already there and active around the learning resources that you're providing.
Yeah, exactly. And taking a step back, what we have most of the times is a new technology, a new way to do things that, obviously, it being new, people, and by people I mean developers, are not really accustomed to how to do that, right? These are the tools that they will be using to create their own stuff. So exactly as you just mentioned, Shannon, if you're looking for how-tos, you can either ask other people, which brings the community component in, or you can depend on the company that has created this technology, or even in the open source kind of style, to educate you on that. So this makes perfect sense. And, both you jumping in and adding these things is all too insightful. But this also brings a question to my mind, how setting a developer enablement or developer education strategy, can influence the VC buy-in. What
Sure.
what ticks the boxes? Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So, company building, if you're thinking about this from the perspective of a VC, you have companies in your portfolio that you want the founders to build successfully. And that whole endeavor of company building is largely focused on a specific pain that you believe people will pay you to help them solve. So, as part of the method of building a company, from say validating your initial idea to developing your ICP, your ideal customer profile, to working with design partners to build the first version of your product, and finally in developing your go-to-market strategy. If you have that obsession on that obsession with the user experience, especially if your users are developers, you have to have a mindset through every stage of that company building journey that is focused on solving that pain, that developer pain, some aspect of their workflow that you're going to make dramatically better. And throughout every single stage of building the company, you're going to have to learn from your users what it is that they are going to find most valuable, what it is that is going to really help them bridge that gap to an experience that is much better than the one they're currently wrestling with. So, developer education is a fundamental part of this, both in terms of helping your prospective users become aware, providing an awareness a function for your organization, but also in user success. But one aspect that we haven't talked about yet is what you learn from your users through their experience with your documentation and your other educational offerings that play a fundamental role in helping you build your company. Because you have a product that you're offering to them, but you also have to teach them how to use it. And those two sides of that coin are both the experiences with both sides of that coin, both the product itself as well as the educational offerings that you're providing, are important, are fundamental to helping you understand how it is that you need to go about reaching your audience. If the tutorials that you've put together, which primarily serve an awareness role, making your prospective community aware of the features that you provide, the way in which you're solving their pain, or the pain itself that you're trying to solve, aren't resonating with your audience, aren't resonating with who you believe your audience to be, that is a very strong signal that you need to take a closer look at what pain you think you're solving for users, who you believe your users are, and evaluate, are we trying to solve the right problem here? Or is it just that the way we've structured our material, our content, isn't resonating with the audience? But getting that match right is a powerful way to help you make the right next step at every phase of your company building journey. And having a strategy for building your company that is focused on or obsessing over the developer experience down to the level of their experience with documentation is something that is incredibly important to those that you're getting guidance from and investment from, because they need to see that. They and you as a founder need to have that kind of focus if you're going to hit your milestones and set yourself up for your next round of fundraising.
Yeah, you should listen in order to be able to address. Nate, anything to add?
Yeah, if I were to summarize what Shannon just said, it's the act of educating your customers and prospective customers about your product is a form of customer discovery, right? Shaping your product to meet the true pains, the true problems that your customers have, not what you think they have, but what they actually have. And the act of creating that educational content helps you to refine your ideal customer profile. It helps you to refine the messaging. It helps you to refine how you can actually provide value to that customer. So this is something that we've heard from our customers as well, is that they've learned more about their product and what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, where it adds value by creating training content, educational content, course content around that product, because it's just so many more data points that they can measure as you get new people coming in, adopting your product. You learn all the things that are missing or the gaps in your product, and you learn more about your customers in the process. So I love how, Shannon, how you brought that all together to show that this is another form of discovering your ideal customer and really making sure that your product is a good fit with that market.
Yeah, and also this refining that you just mentioned is how you will actually evolve the product, and create something that your users would love. So talking about evolution, how do you expect this component of developer education or developer enablement to evolve in the future? What do you see coming up next? We already, Shannon already mentioned that, more and more VCs are interested in this part. Mm-hmm. How do you see it evolving? I'll start with you, Nate.
Yeah, I think we've seen over the last year and a half during the pandemic that education has really moved online. It was already moving in that direction, but I think COVID sort of accelerated that general trend from, what are more traditional in-person classroom experiences to more of an online self-paced kind of learning experience. And I think we're going to continue to see that as companies are doing away with their offices. People are working from anywhere in the world that they want to work. They're really demanding learning experiences that they can do on their own time and that are sort of bite-sized, just-in-time learning, as opposed to more formal experience where you might take several days off to go to a training facility and have an instructor-led training. I don't think instructor-led training is going away because there's definitely value there. I just think it's morphing into more of an online delivery where we're going to see hybrid models, something like, the scalability that you see with a MOOC platform like Coursera or edX or Udacity, but with the added benefit of like a support channel or an instructor that you can ask questions to. Shannon talked about in a previous conversation about how in the early days of MongoDB, they would sort of embed someone inside the organization. And the training was almost like a mini consulting project. And obviously that doesn't scale really well if you have hundreds or thousands of customers. But I think moving education online gives us an opportunity to try to create those hybrid experiences where you have all the advantages of self-paced, but you have the ability to reach out and get the help you need from a trusted advisor, from a peer-to-peer community. And I'm seeing some moves in the direction of using AI to kind of provide the most common answers, to common questions. But I think there's still going to be a need for that expert help, especially if a company is doing something that's maybe a bit outside the norm and they're really pushing the limits of what the product can do. You're going to need to augment that online learning experience with expert help. So finding a way of doing that, I think, is going to be both a big challenge, but also a huge opportunity.
So picking up on a couple of things that Nate said. So I am seeing a trend toward more bite-sized learning opportunities. I agree. I don't think instructor-led training is going to go away. There are definitely scenarios in which customer organizations want to ramp a team in as short amount of time as possible to hit a project delivery deadline. But in terms of the self-paced experience for developers, the ability to jump in and essentially level up with a short module, something that's more like the 5 to 10 minute range versus the 45 to an hour long experience, I think is one trend that we're going to see more of. And taking what Nate had to say about access to an expert, something that we believe it unusual is that there needs to be that's related to that idea. is that we believe there needs to be a tighter collaboration between functions within an organization, between marketing and developer relations and education. And so really going to market with your product where your strategy assumes those functions. And if you're an open source company, you've got some community players as well. And together you are thinking about how you are moving people from awareness through your funnel to adoption and eventually a commercial relationship. Having every member of the team knowing what their responsibility is and what role they're playing with respect to how we're leveraging developer education, how we're supporting the community and building the community, how we're providing access to experts that they can go to with questions in a just-in-time type of environment, and how we can then pull from those experiences as an organization to identify individuals that can serve as champions for our organization to help us magnify the effect of everything else that we're doing. This type of go-to-market strategy where you're thinking about a more integrated strategy involving some of these newer functions, education and community, I think is another change or innovation that we're going to see going forward.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for that. This is also a perfect way to close this episode and wrap everything up. Now, if our listeners want to hear more from you, how can they reach you? Shannon?
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and happy to engage in some follow-up conversation.
Okay, great. Nate?
Yeah, I'm Nate Aune on Twitter. If you want to learn more about Appsembler and how we help companies, you can go to appsembler.com, APPSEMBLER.
Perfect. Thank you both. I think you're a very powerful duo for this episode. So thank you very much for all your insights. And thanks to our listeners for listening to Under the Hood of Developer Marketing, the podcast devoted to developer marketing and relations. You can listen to all episodes, find free resources and the latest news, and also join our community at devralx.com. You can subscribe to our bite-sized bi-weekly digest or follow us on Twitter at @DataHQ. Nate, Shannon, it's been perfect. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And for our listeners, thank you for listening to Under the Hood of Developer Marketing, the podcast devoted to developer marketing and relations. You can listen to all episodes, find free resources, and the latest news at devralx.com. You can also subscribe to our bite-sized bi-weekly digest or follow us on Twitter at @DataHQ.